Now, I'd like to share with you some learnings that my team and I have gotten out of a project I've been working on the past year and a half. And the project is essentially a software called Ad Optimum. And what we built was a platform, a tool that provides rapid creative measurement. So clients input their ads and they submit it for analysis. And we have our methodology used to assess the ads, assess the creative quality, and then we give them back scores across all these metrics. And it basically helps advertisers make decisions about understand the quality of the creative and then make decisions based on that without spending their whole marketing budget first. So I'm not here to peddle Ad Optimum, but we got a lot of interesting insights out of there, and they don't exist elsewhere because this is our research that for the most part we conducted. But I'm also going to sprinkle in a little bit of third-party research. So yeah, in building our software, we conducted a lot of measurement. The important primary question we were trying to solve was, can you predict conversion rates, purchase rates, just by looking at creative and assessing creative and developing a methodology for assessing it? And so we tested out a bunch of different ways you can look at creative and the type of attributes they have, video length, video size, and ultimately we arrived at 15 or so attributes, creative attributes, and we measured how important they are to a creative. And so what we eventually developed was a statistical model. I don't need to get into the details here, especially because I'm rushing through this relatively fast. But what we found was that 30% of the variation in purchase rate could be predicted by the creative metrics we were looking at. In other words, targeting aside and optimization aside, all these tactics that normally we fixate on really heavily, all of those aside, we found that 30% of purchase rate could be explained by these creative metrics. Metrics like thumb stopping score of an ad, or how product centric that ad is, or how easily message comprehension comes across, perceived value, call to action clarity, etc. So not only does this tell us that creative quality is really important and directly and significantly impacts purchase rate, but we actually identified a list of metrics, a list of creative attributes that are most important for achieving high purchase rates. So that's what I'm going to get into over the next few slides. So what are these metrics that are so important for predicting actual business metrics like purchase rate? So we identified these 17 metrics, and as you can see here, they are to an extent categorized by their position in the marketing funnel, with upper funnel being where awareness, ad recall takes place, mid funnel is the consideration area, and lower funnel is where things like intent, action intent, purchase intent take place. And all of these steps are critical towards finally having a purchase or conversion at the end. So we found that all of these metrics are important predictors of purchase rate, and some of them are slightly more important than others, but there's also a list of things we can do as advertisers to make sure that our creative hits a lot of these metrics here, hits a lot of these creative attributes. You know, I touched on this a little bit earlier in this course, but what we found was that looking at those metrics can predict purchase rate really well. And yet click-through rate was not a good indicator of purchase rate. And this goes back to why we don't optimize for clicks and why we optimize for something that's closer to our business objective like purchases and add to carts, because click-through rates, clicks, engagements are not a good proxy for business results. So how can you build your creative so that it actually has long-term impact on conversion rate, purchase rate, and sales lift? I want to now pull from some third-party research. This came out from Facebook in May 2021, roughly around there. There's a link in the bottom corner if you're interested. And Facebook looked at a meta-analysis of 35 brand lift studies across 34 advertisers across 10 verticals. So a really good sample size. And within this study, 57% of the brands saw brand awareness uplift for their competitors as well as for themselves. So these advertisers are running campaigns, and Facebook measures, did users experience brand awareness lift? And across more than half of these cases, they found that when an advertiser is running a campaign, their competitors benefited as well as them. So pretty shocking metric here. And the key reason that they identified was lack of branding. In the absence of a distinctive, recognizable, and mnemonic visual ID, the entire product category is lifted. So this is essentially a fancy way of saying that advertisers who didn't have distinct, clear, and unique branding were actually helping their competitors because users were not distinguishing between that brand and the category as a whole. What's the takeaway here? It's really critical for marketers to establish a brand identity in their creative. It's not enough just to advertise product shots and show how your product is used, but you really need to lean into some marketing fundamentals and establish your branding. So a lot of the metrics with Ad Optimum that we look at, things like believability, uniqueness, value, perceived value, these are components of what we call branding. And it's especially true if you're a brand that's new or young to the market, and if you're a brand in a very competitive category or competitive industry. It's really important to have distinct, unique branding. So with this all in mind, what can you as an advertiser do differently to make sure that you have effective branding and that you're actually building into your creative the attributes that I talked about that we discovered through Ad Optimum? Here is a creative optimization checklist that I put together. And I've had similar but shorter creative checklists for my previous course that you may be familiar with, but this list is better backed by data and it's a little bit more detailed. So these are essentially questions you should ask yourself as you're building creative to see if your ad is meeting these conditions. And it's going to be difficult to meet every single condition within a single ad, but it's important to be cognizant of what you're sacrificing. And it's important to try to hit as many of these as you can realistically. So the first point, focal point. Does your ad have a clear focal point that draws the eye or multiple noisy focal points? With Ad Optimum, we found that ads that have a clear focal point do end up with a better conversion rate than those with multiple noisy focal points. Mobile optimized is another metric we look at. Did you design and test your creative on a mobile device? And is it legible? Is everything fully visible and easy to digest on a mobile screen? Then thumb stopping score. How noticeable and attention catching is your ad? Does it have thumb stopping power as a user is scrolling through their feed? Product centric. Can a new user easily identify the product or service being advertised in your ad within the first 3 seconds, or ideally even at second 0? Then message comprehension. Can a user understand the main message of your ad within the first 3 seconds without having sound on? Quality. Does your production quality, images, videos, and text, do they portray your product as being of high quality? This is an assessment that a user makes when they see your product. In the first few seconds, they make an assessment on quality, and that impacts conversion rates down the road. Believability. This is a metric that we found statistically has a really high importance when it comes to predicting purchase rates. How believable is the ad and its key message and any claims you're making? I'll show you a few examples of this in a minute. Uniqueness. Does the ad portray a product that is clearly unique? This comes back to distinct and unique branding. You need to make sure that you are differentiating from others within your industry. Usefulness. Do you use your copy, headline, and image/video to easily convey the core benefits being provided by the product? And this is why we focused in on copywriting and benefit copywriting earlier. Competitive difference. Does your ad portray a product that is unique from competitors? You want to make sure you're not lifting up your competitors and that you are establishing a difference between you and them. Call to action clarity. Can the user easily identify the action you want them to take? And finally, perceived value. Does the copy, headline, and images and videos clearly communicate the benefits that are valuable at an emotional level to your target audience? So when you're building new creative or assessing your existing creative, I'd strongly encourage you to take your ads through this checklist and figure out what metrics you have and you're doing quite well at and which ones are missing. And is there an opportunity to change your copy, to change your headlines, to change how you've constructed your ad to make sure you're ticking more boxes on this checklist? Let's look at a couple examples here. Let's look at one metric in particular, focal point. because this one's easy to see how it gets done well and when it needs improvement. So on the left, you have two examples of ads with low focal point scores. Cluttered or noisy image and video composition can act as a sensory overload to users, resulting in what I call disqualifying behavior. In other words, if a user sees too much noise, they keep scrolling. That's just the way it is. So in these two examples, there's simply a lot going on here, and it can be difficult to fixate on any one particular area in the ad. But if you compare them to the ads on the right, your eyes are drawn to a central item or text and can draw users' attention more easily and drive awareness and consideration. So these are pretty good examples here. Now, do all of your ads need to have a single focal point like this? No, they don't. There's no need to take things to an extreme, but we should know that this is an important creative attribute and we should try to build it into some of our ads when we can. Here's another example, believability. So as I mentioned, believability is a really important predictor of purchase rate. In fact, it's weighted a little bit higher than other metrics within our models. And on the left here, you have examples of ads that generated low believability scores. If you have unsupported, lofty claims, this can hurt the believability of an ad. Also, if you're not curating your product images and prices that well, and it feels disjointed from the real value, then that can create distrust. So this one on the left, Dollar Shave Club completely changed my life. Some folks, so when we ran this through our system, it did generate a low believability score. It's hard to buy into both of these quotes that this ad has here, and it's sort of quite a huge claim, especially for just a razor. So I think they may have pushed things a little bit too far there. Even more dramatic, this example from Wish, $2 for 18K pure gold. I mean, it's quite obvious why that's not believable, but Wish needs to be more careful about, this is obviously a dynamic ad plugged into its catalog, which I know is millions of products long, but this can have a detrimental impact on long-term perception. So this reflects on your brand and it's hard to undo that damage. Let's compare that to high believability scores. High believability ads, they may be showing a product in use, unboxings, breaking down and deconstructing the components of your product or service. This can increase believability. Authentic testimonials can also build trust and believability, and just in general, not making claims that aren't valid. So this example by Crocked, a DIY pottery kit company, they are not making outrageous claims. They are simply presenting their product in the way it gets used and describing how easy and simple it is to use their product. And then TransferWise is using social proof here. They're pulling in a testimonial, and it's backed by Trustpilot. And so this style of testimonial on the right here by TransferWise just ends up being much more believable than the one on the left with Dollar Shave Club. So a good example of how to do that. So those were two metrics we examined of the 17 that my team and I found to be pretty important indicators of conversion rate. It's important to be mindful of them and to try to achieve them when you're building your creative. So within this section, what did we look at? Well, we started by discussing feature copy and benefit copy, and we discussed the importance of transitioning your features into benefits because they resonate more significantly with users. That improves your conversion rates and it builds long-term trust and long-term brand lift. Then we looked at my copywriting formula, and the copywriting formula provides you with a structure, a framework for consistently being able to produce high value copy variants that convert. Then we looked at Ad Optimum and the various pieces of research that have come out of that project, along with a set of creative learnings that can be applied to improve creative resonance and conversion rates. This all ladders up to my creative optimization checklist, something you can go through when you're assessing creative and assessing it for areas of opportunity so you can achieve creative resonance throughout every step of the marketing funnel.